This is my presentation on professional communication overseas with a focus on Switzerland's Ticino region. Of the 26 cantons in Switzerland, Ticino is the only Italian canton. It is influenced by a mix of both Swiss and Italian culture, and atmosphere can seem a little bit more relaxed than German or French Swiss culture, but those social norms and contracts that you see in the Swiss ways are still very firm. People in Ticino are very strongly passionate about the fact that they are Swiss. They are not Italian, so that should not be forgotten. Riva San Vitale and Lugano are both within this Ticino region, so when you're at the Seeger Center, this will be a lot of the influence that you will see. One of those things that is most important is the verbal and nonverbal communication. We have to communicate with people to kind of get through our daily lives. So the spoken word in Ticino is going to be Italian, but most of the people in the area do know English. So when you're at shops in Lugano or even Riva, um, people will be able to communicate with you, and you won't have too much trouble, but it's good to try a little bit of Italian. People are going to be non-confrontational, but they will be direct with their words. You're going to see moderate speaking levels, greetings with a handshake, or just a simple buongiorno, especially if you're entering a shop or a restaurant. Something important to note that kisses on the cheeks are used often here in this region, but those are usually reserved for close friends. Timeliness is seen as a sign of respect. The Swiss are known to be very punctual, and that there's no difference here in Ticino. Small talk is less common and is going to be reserved for closer relationships. So you're not going to just start a conversation with somebody in Switzerland about their personal life. It's going to be about more bigger, broader issues. Next, we have trains and public transportation. So trains are going to be the most common, probably form of transportation that you will use when staying at the Seeger Center. Also buses. The trains will run on a prompt, timely schedule with very limited delays, but you will know if something is delayed. Empty seats will be filled as the train continues on the journey. And what I mean by that is people will either ask verbally or gesture non-verbally to see if that seat is taken. And if it is not, they are likely to sit down there. We had a couple instances where people kind of just pointed and put themselves in or didn't even gesture, but most of the time people will gesture and ask if they can sit there. A lot of the times that is dependent on maybe age or gender of the person. Especially on trains and public transportation, like I said previously, you are to speak in a very low, respectful voice volume, not to be super rowdy or loud. No shoes on the seat, but people might get creative. What I mean by this is you are not supposed to put your shoes on the seat fabric. But as you can see in this top picture, this woman is laying across horizontally and she has her feet hanging off the chair, and then this other person has her shoes off and is across the aisle. Cultural differences in daily life. So some of the things that we might see are shops closing by 7 p.m. on weekdays and then close completely on Sundays. This is very different from what we're used to in the United States, as we are kind of used to being able to go and get whatever we need whenever we need it. Shops and businesses will close for lunch for 2 or more hours. An example of this that I remember from being in Riva is the post office was closed for about 2.5 hours each day for lunch. Grocery shopping is seen as a daily ritual rather than weekly stocking, and what I mean by this is that the Swiss historically have had smaller fridges, so when they would go grocery shopping, they would only get what they need for the day, and this is a tradition that even as fridges have gotten larger and they have more space, they still do less shopping for the week and more just daily. Quiet hours start at 10 p.m. every day, so just when you are outside, you're expected to keep a very low voice volume, not be rowdy. You're probably going to see less cars driving around, things like that. And then laundry is shared and time is scheduled between residents, kind of back to how refrigerators were smaller. Swiss apartments are pretty small, so there's not nearly as much space for big washing and drying machines. So there's a shared unit amongst all of the residents in an apartment complex, and the time to use the machines is scheduled out, and you are supposed to be very timely, very on top of when your time is to go and schedule. So same at Steger, you have to be very prompt and on top of your laundry if you're staying in the villa. Restaurants and food service, this is one of the things that I found really interesting, some of the differences. Places may not open to serve food until 2 p.m., but maybe open for drinks. You're going to spend more time sitting at restaurants. The Swiss very much value fine dining and conversation rather than pub culture. So you're going to have spend a lot more time just sitting and talking rather than anything rowdy or crazy. In the Ticino region specifically, food is going to be traditionally Italian with risotto, gnocchi pizza being very common. And then last but not least is one of the biggest differences between Switzerland and the United States is service charges are automatically applied to the bill and you are not expected to tip. Tipping is actually seen as pretentious and a little overzealous, so you don't need to tip. And then here's my works cited. That is my presentation on all of the little kind of nuances of professional communication overseas if you are staying at the Steger Center. Thank you.